this right here.
All righty. Good morning. This is our Labor Day 2020. We're in a different time, and we've got one of my dear friends and favorite leaders, Rich Trumka, that's joining us today. So we're very fortunate to have you joining us, and I certainly appreciate it, Rich. This is a different Labor Day, as we're going to talk a little bit about today. We're kind of in both a health crisis, economic crisis, and a human rights crisis that we're up against. So it's, we've seen a lot of Labor Day in challenging times, and that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. But I want to first start by doing a little intro for everybody that doesn't really know as much about you. I've, gotten to know you over the years with our work, but, you were the youngest leader elected to the United Mine Workers of America, who has a rich history in our labor movement. I believe you were elected in 1982.
Correct.
You were a Penn State graduate, and Villanova Law, I believe, is where you got your law degree. I first got to know you on the Pittston strike and the Pittston coal fields in Camp Solidarity. I was working up in East Tennessee during that period, and that's where I first met you. And then I was with the Industrial Union Department, and you came to Birmingham, I believe, in like '84, where we had you down for a Solidarity Day in Birmingham, and I was the event organizer for them, and that's where I first met you and got to know you. And since that time, worked with you for a number of years when you first got elected with President Sweeney, and then went on to become president of the AFL-CIO. So not only have you been my boss, but I also call you a good friend, and I appreciate all
Absolutely.
the work you've done. So let's just kind of get to the heart of the matter. The mine workers are steeped in history, and when you think about Labor Day, there's really no way to think about Labor Day without thinking about the mine workers and, all the battles in the coal fields for health care and retirement and safety. Things that we really see again today. But talk a little bit about that history of, kind of the mine workers and those battles, that what Labor Day is really about.
Sure. First, let me say thanks for having me on, Keith. And it is good to be back with my old buddy, that being you. I got to tell you, I'm excited about this, and happy Labor Day to everybody out there, all your listeners. Our union got started in 1890 in Columbus. In 1890, miners came together as victims because they were getting victimized by coal companies everywhere. But when they united and they left in solidarity, they were victims no more. I can promise you that. And in our first Constitution, I'm very, very proud of this. We had a clause that prohibited discrimination based on race, color, creed, or national origin. And we elected 2 black men to our very first executive board, one from Tennessee and one from Wheeling, West Virginia. And the mine workers believed that every worker should be together, and solidarity starts from within. And so we tried to practice that. And we had enormous battles from the Harlan coal fields. They called it Bloody Harlan, where we battled co-operators to get the right to have a voice on the job. We were sort of like serfs at that time. They would bring you into a company town. They would make you pay for your tools. They would make you do all the dead work for nothing. And then they'd even cheat you on the coal that you put out. They'd misweigh it and cheat you. And so we fought first to get a union scaleman, somebody who would weigh the coal fairly so that we could get fair wages. And then we decided that we really had to do more. And we started looking for pensions, and we got the first multi-employer pension plan, the first multi-employer health care plan. And some people may not know this, Keith, but our goal at that time, we said that we wanted to take care of our members from cradle to grave and the family thereafter. And we wanted to have quality health care within 25 miles of every one of our members. And so we started building hospitals throughout Appalachia with our money and bringing them, staffed them with quality doctors. And then after they got up and running and established, we gave them to the community so that there'd be quality health care everywhere. Those were some of the fights. And then, of course, then we came to people like Pittston in the late 80s, and you talked about Camp Solidarity. And Pittston wanted to go back and undo all the progress that we made. We had promised retirees that they would get health care for life and a pension for life. And Pittston said, we were just kidding. We don't want to give them that health care for life anymore. And we said, well, you're going to honor that commitment. We're going to make sure you did. And so we struck for about a year. And it was an interesting strike. We took over one of their prep plants. We had high schools that went on strike in support of their parents. There we had the daughters of Mother Jones who took over the Pittston office a time or two. We had people from all around the world. And my favorite story about that, Keith, was Pittston had a lobster dinner for their scabs one day. And by the way, not a single mine worker crossed the picket line in that entire 12 months, not one. That was real solidarity. And so they had this dinner and tried to demoralize us. They put pictures in the paper. And the next day, Eddie Hanley, who was the president of the hotel and restaurant employees, called me up and he said, Rich, I understand that they fed those scabs lobsters with a uniform chef. And I said, they did, Eddie. They tried to do that to demoralize us. And he said, you tell your members that they're going to be fed by 5 uniformed chefs from the Greenbrier, which is a 5-star restaurant, and they're not going to get fed one day. I'm going to feed them every day until the strike's over. And for 10 months, those 5 chefs fed us. I got to tell you, I don't think I ever had a better meal since when I was down there. And I can tell you this, I bet Eddie Hanley's looking down right now smiling because he was the epitome of solidarity, and he was a real brother and a good friend to me.
Well, and you know, there's a lot of things that whenever you think about that strike, Rich, I mean, that if you weren't paying attention to it and in that area during that time, is like, not only were you running a strike line, but you had a judge, you had these bought and paid for company judges that were trying to take all the revenues and freeze all your accounts. And so you were having to like stay one step ahead. And then you also responded with a little political action. I mean, so this was kind of like a strategic campaign, staying a step ahead of the law, so to speak. It was a strike line, keeping people to stay strong, and then you then exercise political power. Talk a little bit about that piece as well.
Sure. First of all, the judge was fining us $500,000 a day, and the amount doubled every day. So it was 500,000, a million, 2 million, 4 million, 8 million, 16 million, 32 million, 64 million, 128, and it kept going and going and going and going. It was into octillions of dollars at one time. I didn't know what an octillion was, but I know it was more than I had in my wallet at the time. And so, yeah, they were trying to garnish our money so we couldn't pay strike benefits and health care for our striking brothers and sisters. And so we kept avoiding them. We kept moving the money around so they couldn't garnish us. But then there was an election, and the judge's dad was an 18-year incumbent in the House of Representatives in Virginia, and he had nobody running against him. We decided that we would run one of our strikers against him, not only a striker, but a striker that he had put in jail for violating his injunction. The guy's name was Jackie Stump, and we ran a write-in campaign, and they said his dad was unbeatable. We beat him with a write-in campaign, which is, as you know, very, very difficult to do. And we took him out of office, and we put one of our own in office, and it showed the power that workers have when they come together, either on a picket line or politically. We showed that entire state, and at the end of that strike, this is amazing, Keith, 94% of the people in Virginia at the end of that strike said the mine workers should win that strike and keep their health care. 94%.
Yeah, that is a big deal. Well, Rich, when you think about kind of the history of Labor Day, and think about what all those battles were over those years: healthcare, retirement, safe jobs, good wages. That's really what we're fighting for here today, right? I mean,
Well, every day, workers try to make the place better. We fight for the dignity of work. We try to make it so that the next generation, that our kids and their kids can do better than we do. That those jobs that are good jobs now weren't such good jobs when we first got started. But unionization and people coming together and sacrificing and fighting and through collective bargaining and standing in solidarity made bad jobs into good jobs. And we want to have more of those good jobs around. And so Labor Day is really a day that we can sit back and think about all the people's shoulders who we are standing on, all the fights that have preceded us, all the blood that's been shed, all the lives that have been lost, all the health, people's health that's been taken away, so that we could get to this point and do better. And then, because that, Keith, as you well know, is the American dream. Our kids doing better than we did. Each generation doing a little bit better. And it's the union movement that does that. And it's solidarity that does that for the union movement.
Yeah, and this Labor Day, I mean, this pandemic, I know, our country has been faced with that before, but most of us have either never saw anything like this, our grandparents and parents before them, had seen. But when you think about the COVID-19 and the impacts, and here we are now, rolling in towards 6 months, of this pandemic, and seeing how many workers, like entire unions like IATSE and Unite here are out of work, and our airline workers, are starting to get hit more and more, and probably about to get hit even more. So many jobs that's up against it. It's really changed everything, with people who would have thought grocery workers and others would be considered essential frontline workers. So it's kind of changed everything. But give us some thoughts on this. I mean, like, I know the HEROES Act and why it's so important, because, I mean, you got workers losing their health care. There's all kind, there's going to be really real impacts on some of our retirement plans for some of those unions we talked about. Talk a little bit about why the HEROES Act and how we got to respond this Labor Day.
Well, first of all, let me just maybe outline the magnitude of the problem that we have. Not only do we have over 6 million people that have been infected and 183,000 that have lost their lives, but you have over 29 million people right now, Keith, that are out of work, that don't have a job and don't have any enhanced unemployment benefits. And so they're starting to hurt. You have about 12.5 million people that have lost their employer-sponsored health care, and there's no help for them on COBRA without the HEROES Act. Last year, the unemployment rate in San Diego was about 3.6%. And right now it's about 12.3. Mm-hmm. That's just 1 year difference. Yeah. And now take that and magnify that all over the country. So the first CARES Act that was passed, it provided money to employers to keep workers on the payroll. Because you know and I know that our economy is 72% driven by consumer spending. That spending is what creates demand, and that demand is what creates jobs. So if people don't have money, they can't spend. Right now, without the $600 enhancement, people are living on about 40% of their previous take-home pay. That means they had to cut their spending by 60%. It means there's no demand. There's no way to work themselves out of it. And I really have to make this statement, Keith. I believe that Joe Biden understands something that Donald Trump never did and still doesn't, that you can't beat or recreate the economy unless you beat the pandemic.
Yeah.
And you can't beat the pandemic unless you keep workers safe. And he's never understood that. So he keeps trying to force the economy back, and all it keeps doing is backfiring in all of our faces. Now, he's not responsible for COVID, but he darn sure is responsible for the mess and the incompetent response to it and what's happened to the economy. So what we need now is the HEROES Act. One, we have no pandemic standard, no healthcare standards to protect workers. These are all voluntary standards. The HEROES Act would say, here's the standard you must apply and must abide by it. And if OSHA won't enforce it, then we can enforce it ourselves. And I'll come back to OSHA in a little while. Two, it says the $600 will be increased because people spending $600 are responsible. That's supported over 5.5 million jobs. So when that $600 goes away, those 5.5 million jobs that it supports are going to go away. That's another thing. It doesn't take, there's nothing in it for our pensions. You know, we had a crisis in our pensions, the nation's pensions system before the pandemic, and the pandemic's made it worse. We have no help for state and local governments. State and local governments have been laying off. There's about 1.2 million fewer state and local government workers right now, and that's going to increase because revenue to the states has been shrinking, and they can't provide the services that they need. This would help them. There's no money for the post office. The post office has been doing a tremendous job, and the president wants to undermine confidence in it because he doesn't want people to vote by mail, because he knows if a lot of people vote, he's going to lose the election. If only a few people vote, he thinks he can win the election.
Right.
There's no help for schools. You can't send people back to school unless they're safe. You can't protect our teachers, our students, unless there's money to help them do this thing properly. And that's socially distanced and stay apart and clean the schools every hour or so that they're always kept clean. All of that's riding on the line. Nancy Pelosi in the House of Representatives passed the HEROES Act 105 days ago. And Mitch McConnell's done nothing since. He's in the middle of a 3-week vacation. So while the country is literally, people are hurting, starving, not being able to eat, not being able to pay their rent or their mortgage. And by the way, the CARES Act prevented them from foreclosing on mortgages or kicking people out, evicting people from renters. That's about to expire, and they're going to face that same thing. So while all of that's happening, he's on vacation, having a good time, not thinking about workers who are suffering or the economy that really is taking a broadside.
Yeah, it's it's so sad that the House passed this all the way back in May and sent it to his desk, and then now it's like panic mode because they refuse to just take it up and even begin to work through. Because it is a complicated bill and there's a lot to work out, but it would have been so easy to have gotten done in that period of time.
The problem is that the Republican Party right now is in total disarray.
Yeah.
Mitch McConnell has 4 different factions, and he can't get any of them to come together to get anything done. And then you got the administration that is up and down, and they're in disarray. You got Mnuchin on one hand, who would like to make a deal perhaps, and you got Meadows on the other hand, his chief of staff, that says we're not making any deal until after the election because we'll win and we won't have to do anything for the Democrats after the election.
Yeah.
And so the country continues to suffer while they dither with each other.
So one of the things that we're doing here in San Diego, as a matter of fact, we're getting ready to vote a recall and retention policy, hopefully at the city council, get it through. But the state, the assembly just passed it, a recall and retention for hotel workers, airport workers, and building services workers, which basically that would require anybody on the payroll prior to the emergency declaration for COVID would be the first in line to be recalled. And so we're trying to pass a local bill, companion bill, that takes us to the end of the year when the state assembly bill would kick in. I mean, a prime example is we've got a hotel here, the Sheraton by the airport, over there near where you stayed at the Hilton right down the street. You pass that Sheraton. United here just organized that back at the end of last year. They were just getting ready to get to the bargaining table on behalf of those workers. It was one of the largest hotel victories in United here in quite a number of years. And what's happening now is they just issue permanent layoffs, termination notices to 206 workers, people with 40, we got workers with 30, 40 years of service laid off, terminated, while they're putting people that's got a few weeks that had just been hired when the pandemic started, they're keeping them on. And so, it's those kind of things that we know we're up against, because the question we're posing on this Labor Day is, will workers share in the recovery? Because if you and I was there working with you on the financial reform in 2008, we were doing those, I think about 250 actions over a 3-week period that we did, and finalized it with propping you up by the bull on in New York, where we did the big action there at the very end, right before they voted it. But workers didn't share in that. Workers lost their homes. The big banks got the bailout. And so the question becomes, does workers share in this? Because that's the kind of example of how workers are going to get screwed in the end. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, that's one of the nice thing about Joe Biden. He has a plan for that. It's called Build Back Better, because it's not just building back to what we have, because we know what we have wasn't working for a lot of us, particularly people of color and many of others. So it's Build Back Better. He's got an infrastructure program. Now, you remember Donald Trump talked about building infrastructure. Here we are, 3 years and 7 months or 8 months into his term, and he hasn't done one bit of infrastructure building. Joe knows that infrastructure will make us more collective, effective, more competitive, and it will also create a lot of jobs. As a program to retrofit 4 million buildings, it'll create 4 million more jobs in the process of doing that. So he's working through to bring manufacturing back, talking about working with us on the tax code to reward people who actually produce things here and not reward people who take jobs overseas, like the president's plan did, the last tax plan he had. It actually rewards people if you take jobs overseas, because they pay zero in taxes if you build it somewhere else as opposed to here. All of those things are coming together at this time, and so it's going to be a real vote, a real decision, and a real contrast to where you want to go. It is about building the country back or rebuilding Donald Trump's empire. Yeah. He wants to build his empire. We want to build a country. Workers are going to succeed and win, and that's what we're going to do. I was also interested in his convention, because after 4 days of jumping up and handstanding and doing everything, there was no plan to fix the pandemic. No plan to fix the economy, none whatsoever. They spent the first day, you'll recall, union busting.
Yeah.
Had a woman on, her last name was Friedrichs. She sued the union a number of times, and she said that unions are subverting the republic. Subverting the republic, that's what she said about us. And then they had Nikki Haley on, you remember?
Uh-huh.
And Nikki Haley was probably the most anti-worker, anti-union governor in the history of the country. And she talked about changing symbols, changing divisive symbols. And when she was in office, she used one of the oldest relics of segregation, and that's right to work. Right to work was passed so that white people didn't have to join the same union as black people. That's why they passed right to work, and she was a champion in that. And then you had the old boy from Wisconsin,
Hmm.
Scott.
Scott.
Oh, I can't remember his last name anymore. But he was on there talking about how wonderful things are, and
Yeah.
all he did was reduce wages for people and take benefits away from people. So he actually gave up even the charade of talking to workers, trying to want to help us and help unions, because it was the most anti-union, union bashing convention that I've seen in my lifetime. I've never seen any party bash unions the way that the Republicans did during this convention.
Yeah, I know. No doubt about it. Well, I know we're bumping up against the clock because I think you've got some other stuff, but I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't, kind of like at least address the third leg of the human rights struggle, the Black Lives Matter. And I know the AFL-CIO building has, kind of changed itself into, our support. And you're right there where the street is painted, but it's also something that our labor movement has been a part of for a long, long time. And we have to go back and make sure that we're there again. Any words you would say of
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. Where we have to be, the labor movement has to be at the tip of the spear when it comes to fighting racism and the denial of opportunity for any group of people, because that's a workplace issue and they try to use it to divide us. So we are doing that. We're engaging with our police unions to try to get them to change the culture and make sure that the good officers, and there's a lot of good officers. There's 99% of the officers are good people, that they have the power to be able to point out the ones that aren't good officers and stop things from happening. So we don't continue to see black men killed by police officers, that we don't continue to see people harassed for no good reason whatsoever, and that we do bring real opportunity to every American, regardless of the color of your skin, your national origin, who you love or who you worship, so you have a fair chance. That's sort of what I look at on this Labor Day. This is our chance to get back and be the tip of the spear. Because as I said, the mine workers understood that they used race to divide us, and we stopped that at our very first convention in 1890. Whenever there were Martin Luther King's march was going on, it was the auto workers and the mine workers and steel workers that were there promoting it, supporting it, saying that this is the right thing to do. And now all of us have to get into that. We have a task force that I've appointed that's addressing all of that. We're engaging with our police unions to change their culture. We're doing everything that we can to help make this country less prejudiced, less discriminatory, and more fair and equal to everyone. And I have more hope right now than I've had in a long, long time, because people are standing up, and finally, we're having a national conversation about racism and about what really matters in this country.
Well, thank you. I mean, I'll give you the floor for any final words if you got anything on this Labor Day to say. And I certainly just really, Rich, it's a pleasure having you with us. So
Thanks for having me. And listen, you're doing great work out there, Keith. Your people are doing food banks. They're doing everything out there to help the general public and to help our members and workers in need. I want to tell you how proud we are of all the work that you're doing in that entire area. And I just want to say happy Labor Day to everybody. Look, celebrate on Labor Day. That's the day that we brought some good things to people. And after Labor Day's over, get ready to dig in and fight, because what we have to do is elect worker-friendly, union-friendly people to office. And when we do that, you'll start to see the rules of the economy change. And when they change, we'll have a fair economy where everybody, and I mean everybody, has an opportunity to win.
well, that's well said. Thank you very much, Rich Trumka. Thank all of you for joining us here today, and have a happy Labor Day.
Happy Labor Day, buddy.
Thank you.